Hi, I'm Andy. Welcome to Really Random Reads. Today, a video for you about The Sea by Iris Murdoch. I recently did a video on A Severed Head by Iris Murdoch. That novel came out in 1961. Go check it out if you're interested. She wrote it. So Severed Head came out in 61. The Sea came out in 1978. So she wrote it sort of almost 20 years before. This edition that I've got is quite cool. Picked up for £3 from a charity shop. It's an Everyman edition. It's got a severed head in it. It's got the novel of A Severed Head in it, and it's got The Sea. You will find a wealth of content on The Sea, on YouTube, TikTok, all over the place. I'm not gonna try and do some sort of all-encompassing, completely exhaustive, in-depth analytical take on this novel, nor am I really gonna do a review of it. What I'm gonna try to do is give you a bit of a flavour of what the book's about, in themes as much as story, and hopefully leave you with a feeling of, I wouldn't mind going away and checking that out. So, things to say. I usually start with videos on this channel saying how I came across the book. There isn't too much to tell with this one, except I want to say something about setting. So the book is set in the north of England, in an isolated, quite lonely seaside town, and it's never given a name. And I had a bit of a look, and I think it's, from what I could see, people don't know a specific location that Iris Murdoch had in mind when she wrote this novel. It was very nostalgic for me because when I was small, sort of like up until I was 6, I lived in an isolated northern seaside town next to the North Sea, which had been a coal mining town, and then coal mining finished and it was just isolated and very, very cold. And when I was reading this book, it was incredibly similar for that, the setup of it. In the opening, what Iris Murdoch, in my view, does really well, and I've spoken about the difficulty of this in a few videos, she has a character who's essentially just on their own for a good number of pages. The whole first section of this book is a character on their own, and yet it's very engaging, and it kept me wanting to read on and know what was going to happen. Now, you could say cheats slightly because I wouldn't go so far as to say flashbacks, but there's memories coming to the protagonist in this book, and that sort of by proxy gets you some time around other characters. But really, this is a character who's on their own. Male character, living in a cottage, gone to live there because he was a fairly successful actor and a very successful director, and became famous, and he wants to get away from it all, and he goes to live in this cottage. If you've seen the Severed Head video I did recently, you're kind of in familiar ground in that here we have Iris Murdoch again writing about a character who isn't a very nice guy, okay? At the same time, how does she do that in such a way that you want to continue reading it? Why do you want to continue spending this time with this person who isn't very pleasant? I went into that at some length in the other video. I don't want to sort of repeat all those points there. But if that interests you, this is a case in point of how you pull something like that off. What else to share with you? What surprised me was, this is quite a gothic novel. I'm thinking, more than a few shades of Shirley Jackson in this, like Hill House and such. You've got this mysterious kind of curtain in this house that's made up of beads that Murdoch keeps bringing your attention back to. Creepy things are happening there. You have a point where where the main character witnesses this kind of this isn't a spoiler, witnesses a kind of Leviathan sea-like creature. Only was it all in his head? I struggle with magical realism as a genre, and I struggle to engage with fiction that's very fantastical. Didn't have problems with this because it doesn't really hard lean into that. but there's just enough there of the gothic, of the uncanny, that it's very, it left me with feelings of being unsettled, but in quite an enjoyable way, in a way that I look to get from horror books. And I wasn't expecting to find that with Iris Murdoch, and it was kind of a pleasant surprise. Where does this sit on that scale that I mentioned before? You've got books here that are all about character, where very little happens in terms of plot. You've got books here that are all about plot and their characters, you know, they might as well just be names on a page. They're little more than that, they're two-dimensional. This is very, very character-driven. So predominantly, it is a character-driven book. But that's not to say that it doesn't have story, that it doesn't have plot. Nor does it have one of those kind of like annoying, ridiculously open endings that you sometimes get with literature from this sort of time period. So you're getting a story with this, is what I'm trying to say. I'm holding myself back from giving spoilers, but you're getting a story. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. It's told in 3 sections, so unlike A Severed Head, which was short, punchy chapters, and the whole thing really was more of a novella, this is longer in terms of chapter length, but it doesn't feel that it drags, and those chapters do have breaks within them. It's becoming increasingly clear to me that Iris Murdoch is the novelist of self-deception. She deals with that, she writes about that extremely well. In A Severed Head, there was a device where the protagonist wrote 3 different versions of a letter, which he was going to send to somebody else, in all of which, to varying degrees, he was lying to himself as much as to the person he was sending it to. And in The Sea, the narrative is written by the protagonist. That's the device that we're asked to buy into. So this is a retired actor and director who is penning the chronicles of his life, a kind of memoir. And you can perhaps just imagine for the type of self-deception that allows. And it's clever, the way that Iris Murdoch does it. So she gives you enough that you know the character is lying to themselves, but she doesn't, what's that old cliche that it isn't on the nose, okay? So you can see that the character is doing that, you can see that it's intentional on the point of Iris Murdoch, but it's not clunky with loads of scaffolding and such like that. That is taken to quite an extreme level, and when we're talking about character versus story, this is where the story part gets particularly interesting. That is taken to quite an extreme level when the protagonist does something rather shocking. And with the self-deception, you know, at first I kind of didn't even realise they had done this thing. And then when it got more into it, I'm like, hang on, did he just... Oh, he did. And it keeps getting worse. So really engaging for that reason. Final thing I wanted to say about this. I remember when I was at secondary school and there was a teacher talking about a Shakespeare character called Andrew Agucheek. I'm getting that name wrong probably. Nor can I remember actually the play that it's from. Might have been a 12th Night. But the teacher was saying this character is about... He's in love with the idea of being in love. And that is something, I think, for me at least, that Iris Murdoch explores interestingly in this novel and in an engaging way. And also, not just in love with the idea of being in love, but the idea of being in love with the perception of your own youth and nostalgia, and how you might, for example, attach that to certain people, even if the reality is somewhat different. So I started off by saying my aim with this video wasn't to do the definitive YouTube video on the sea, should such a thing exist. It never will. I don't know, maybe I'm doing a disservice, maybe somebody will put one out there that is definitive. But if you're interested in this book, if what I have said at any point in this video has whetted your appetite for it, my suggestion would be not to go and then start looking at loads of other videos about it, but instead to have a go at reading it. Because it would be very rewarding. There is such a lot of material out there about this book, but it does have a plot, you know, and you don't want to spoil it for yourself, which I think would be quite easy to do. I wouldn't even read the blurb of this. I just jump in, see if it's for you. And remember when it starts though, if you want a piece of unsolicited advice and it doesn't put your back up, at first, those first couple of pages, the narrator is a bit grating. The opening paragraph is quite flowery. And if you give up there and then, you kind of don't realize that that is the point that the author's doing that on purpose, you know? It's a statement about the protagonist who's writing the book. It's not that Iris Murdoch sat down with her own voice and thought, this is how I want the novel to open. It's how Charles wants his memoir to open. I hope that makes some kind of sense. Thanks, folks.